Andrew.
Whoops. Let's see.
It being 5:31 on December 2nd, 2024, I'll call to order the meeting of the Shelburne Select Board. First item is acceptance and review of the minutes of our November 18th meeting. Uh, Andrew, you attended. Have you reviewed, prepared to take a motion?
Yes, I'll move to accept.
And I will second in the absence of Tricia from the last meeting. I think that's appropriate. And any discussion on them further?
No.
Then it has been moved and seconded. Andrew,
Aye.
and I am I, and Tricia
I will
abstain.
abstain. Yep.
Perfect. The motion passes 2 and 1 abstention. We can start with department liaison reports. Tricia, do you have anything for us this evening?
I have a lot from emergency management. I've got a little bit from town hall. I went over some of the tax delinquencies with Angel, and she and Terry and I are going to resume, I guess, what once used to occur quarterly, just going over plans and stuff. Terry, you probably had already left. Angels agreed to meet, so hopefully next week we'll start that up again.
Wonderful.
If that time works for you, then we're all set to go on Monday morning on the 9th. I I looked at all of them, and there's one property owner that's responsible for 62% of the delinquent taxes. So we're going to try to get a good plan in place for dealing with that. One of the businesses hopefully has paid, but they had a lot in arrears as well. So we'll talk more about that. Hopefully at the next meeting, I'll have some good news on that front.
Okay.
So regarding emergency management, Tom's been really busy. He conducted a training session with the EOC team, and the team actually requested to meet monthly to continue the training. So earlier, you may remember that they had changed the meetings to quarterly because not everybody was in attendance. But I guess that tabletop exercise also got everyone really motivated. And so now they want to meet monthly instead. They're actually going to have their 2.5-hour CPR training class on January 27th. That's going to be conducted by Community 911 out of Turner's Falls. If y'all remember, that was part of his EMPG grant that he applied for in the 2024. There are 10 slots open, 10 slots available, and they filled almost all of them. So I might attend that too, just so that we've got somebody who's CPR trained up here in my neck of the woods. He got verbal permission from the manager of the business next door to the EOC for use of the parking space by EOC personnel and to plow if needed during an emergency event. So that was something that we had talked about to make sure that there was some understanding in place with neighbors so that when everybody showed up, there was actually a place for them to park and it wasn't going to interfere with, especially in a winter weather event, it wouldn't interfere with what the highway department would need to do to clear that road back there. He and I attended a Teams meeting with Don Ganley and others regarding our statement of interest for the Allenbrook flooding project over there by the highway department. This was the most amazing experience for me, submitting this statement of interest and getting an answer within a couple of days. And then we set up a meeting and we already talked to them and everything. So the short of it is that if we wanted to pursue that grant to look at redoing that whole culvert and doing a project for that area, first of all, the money hasn't been released yet. So we have to wait for that. And then once it is, when they do the review of the projects, it's another 18 months before anything can happen. So it didn't seem like it was a really great idea for us to pursue at this time. And they suggested perhaps using a less urgent place for pursuing this grant. So something that we wouldn't need right away that isn't such a problem. And so we'll have to work on that. And hopefully Tom and Jeff and I can talk about that. We've got the list from you, Jeff. So, what your priorities are, and then we'll just have to kind of look at those again. So regarding that particular culvert, though, the next day or that afternoon, Don Ganley got the release from DER about the culvert replacement grants. They weren't open when we met, but by the time however many hours had passed, DER announced that they are ready to accept project ideas for those culvert replacement projects. And so if we're interested in pursuing that for the culvert area above the highway garage, or it's actually sort of below the highway garage, right? We can submit another statement of interest. We can just use the same thing and schedule a 30-minute call with the DER staff to discuss project ideas or sites. One thing that's interesting about this grant is that they have a special type of grant available for local governments that might be interested in replacing or removing, I'm just reading directly from what it says, an undersized, perched, and or degraded culvert located in an area of high ecological value, which I believe that area is. So that might be something to consider. That just needs to be scheduled by January 10th, so we don't have to discuss it at this meeting because I kind of want to look into it a little bit more. And then kind of tangentially to that, but very important, is on Wednesday, Tom was able to get permission from the landowners of Jessup's Pond, which is right above the highway garage there where the flooding comes from, to go visit. And Jeff, I'm glad you're here. Are you going to be able to attend? You may have just answered Tom when he sent that invitation, and Tom couldn't be here tonight. So do you think you'll be able to be there?
Yeah, on Wednesday.
Wednesday at 8:30, we're going to go look at the pond because from when I've talked to other people, they said there's some issue with maybe the drainage that comes out of there, and we haven't been able to access it. So Tom was able to find out to get permission from the landowner so we can go look at it. And then maybe among the three of us, we can come up with a better idea or a plan or something like that to see what to do next. So that is all about that particular area.
While you're on that, Tricia,
Yeah.
I would just like to point out it's kind of an uncomfortable gray area here in that Andrew is the liaison to the highway department. He is directly responsible to that. Your role with the EMC is not a liaison relationship. So I'm a little uncomfortable hearing you planning things directly with the highway superintendent when really that's Andrew's purview. And I think we need to figure out a way to figure that out. Your grant writing ability and all that is how we kind of got started down that road. And Andrew was in support of submitting the letter of interest too. But taking it beyond that, I think is worthy of some consideration. Just keep that in mind if you would.
Yeah, no, I understand that, Rick. I was, so as the emergency management liaison, this is how it kind of all got started. But I understand that, and we can absolutely, discuss how to go forward after that. I'm just letting you know what we know. And then in terms of emergency management, because that's the thing that Tom has actually had to report to MEMA about that flooding, just to go see what there is. And then after that, we can just report out to you guys and we all decide as a board what we want to do next. Does that seem less gray?
Andrew, are you comfortable with that?
I would just say thank you, Rick, for being mindful of procedure and stuff. I think yeah, there is some overlap here between emergency and the MTV kind of stuff and highway, and I think that the um, probably the way to do this sort of efficiently without having to post a lot of meetings between me and Trisha outside of this one is just to discuss what kinds of proposals or interests you have, Trisha, in this meeting, and then kind of get the go-ahead on any next steps or implementation from here. And then we don't have to post another meeting because we can sort of lay that out, in this meeting. Does that make sense, Rick?
It does to me.
Okay. So I
So if you
guess
want to take follow-up actions, just say what they are and get the go-ahead from your fellow board members, and then we can, you know,
okay.
sail off on those things if they're actions you want to take between now and the next meeting.
So between now and the next meeting, I would like to go make this visit over there to see what the issue is, if there's another way to do it. And then if we decide that it really needs to be, pursuing the culvert replacement municipal assistance grant, that I can go ahead and submit that statement of interest and it would follow along with the one I already presented to you before. And this would go directly to DER if Jeff is in agreement with that.
That sounds fine to me. Just a question. I was spacing out a little bit on your other one where you were talking about the 18-month lead time. Was that for Dragon Brook or I missed it. What was that one for?
This is all about the Allen Brook. They are north of the one that floods the highway department
Oh,
facility and
just
goes
two different grants
across
for the
there.
same focus. Okay. Got
That's
it.
right. That's right. Because
Okay.
after we got the feedback from MEMA about the one at the by the highway garage there, they suggested pursuing this other one that wasn't open when we had the meeting, but then became open like the next day or something. So he sent me all the information, and that's what I just shared with you here. So we're all good that I pursue this DER culvert replacement municipal assistance grant if Jeff thinks this is the way to go for that area.
That's
I,
fine with me.
Andrew's good with it. I'm good with it. So perfect.
Awesome. All right. Thank you guys very much. I'm glad that we were able to clarify that. So going
While,
back
while
to
we're at the end,
oh yes, sorry. Oh, we got to stop. Yep.
yeah, while we're at a good swap point here, it is 5:45. That's the time we have an appointment regarding the dog nuisance hearing that we held at our last meeting. Came up with the solution or the hoped for solution of a fence install between the two property owners. And we were asking Kyle to see if that happened and if everything appears copacetic enough to let us let this lie, or if we need to take further action. And I see Kyle is here. Did you check the condition or state of the fence install?
Yes, so I spoke with Mr. Meadows, who had mentioned last week he was not going to attend this one. There is a fence that has been installed. It appears to run from the road, more or less, all the way along the length of the field up to the wood line way in the back. The fence itself appears to be approximately 5 feet tall, maybe a little bit taller. It is of a woven wire T-post design, like he was mentioning. At this point, based off of the fence that's been designed and installed, it appears it should contain the dog, provided the dog wants to stay contained. It does create a very, very clear barrier, and will allow for a very, very clear understanding if the dog is violating its containment area. There's no question as to where the boundary line is.
Okay. And the complainant is on. Do you have one additional comment?
Just that there are two dogs. There are two dogs. So, I mean, I'm concerned about there were two complaints about two dogs.
As I recall reading them prior to our previous hearing 2 weeks ago, the issue was still the same, that they were coming on your property, and the fence was the resolution. For one dog, it would be for two, it would seem to me.
Well, except one dog has been trained not to jump the fence. The other dog readily jumps the fence. I'm just bringing that up. I hope the fence will work. I think there's a good chance it will work, but I just want there to be an awareness that there are two dogs.
We did have that information, yes.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for helping me with this.
Great. I hope it is the right solution. And Kyle, if I'm reading you correctly, our determination of the dog as a nuisance isn't appropriate at this time, because the fence did get installed, and we would wait to, I think we agreed at our last meeting to see if it did over time. And did I read that correctly?
I believe that was how we left it at the last meeting, that with the fence going in, that there would be a determination of no finding at this time. And like I said, the fence does clearly define a boundary. And if the dog is going over the boundary, then we have a violation, and there's no question as to where the boundary is at this point.
Okay. Any other comments on the
Thank
hearing?
you.
Okay, thank you too. Appreciate it. No other comments on the hearing. I'll close the public hearing.
Rick, I do have a comment.
That would come under discussion after the hearing, and we're there.
Oh,
So
okay.
fire away.
No, just to clarify for Jenna's sake and for Mr. Meadows, even though in absentia, that while this hearing is closed because we've agreed upon one measure and it seems to have been taken, then, we're done with that part of it. But if that measure is not sufficient, then my understanding is it would be up to Jenna Vogt to file a new complaint and say, fence didn't work, dog is on my property, Is that correct, Kyle? That's how it goes?
Yep. No, that's exactly how it would go. So any new violations would be treated as a new violation, and not tied to this hearing. So basically, if there's an additional violation, we're going to act on that violation.
Okay. Good. No, I just wanted to make sure
right back here before you guys.
Right. So I just wanted to make sure we were all understanding where we were leaving this.
That's the way I understood it as well. Any other discussion? I think we need to take a vote of no finding on this complaint. Would that be correct, Kyle?
That is correct.
Okay. Would someone like to make a motion to that effect?
So moved.
I'll second.
And moved and seconded. We will come to a vote. Andrew?
Aye.
And Tricia?
Aye.
And I am aye. The motion passes 3-0, no finding. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kyle.
Thank you, guys. Have a wonderful evening.
You too. Thank you.
Okay, back to liaison reports. Tricia, I believe you had a little more you wanted to bring up.
Yeah. So Tom also got the feedback from Mima about the tabletop exercise, and he's going to make a couple of changes to the comprehensive emergency management plan. And he said he just needed a little more detail on a couple of issues, and then it's going to be ready for, I think, all of our signatures are just yours, Rick. I don't remember, but it has to be signed off. Um, as we mentioned, he's got that, he secured the CPR course. He wrote an article for the community newsletter and submitted it and included information about the drought and the drought notice from MEMA. And his future work includes finding a generator. We did get that response back from the city of Greenfield, which was really nice to get it so quickly, so we could move on. And preparing the SEMP for signatures and working on this town garage flooding concern. So that's what I've got. Thank you.
Terrific. Andrew.
Yeah, I met with Jeff this morning, but since Jeff is here in person, I'll let him speak for himself. If Jeff, do you want to give the board a quick update on your doings? I'm happy to fill in anything that my notes contain.
Sure. I'll probably forget everything we discussed, but I'll start off with the Old Greenfield Road project. I contacted the guardrail people. They came out, measured, marked, and they got me an estimate. Estimate came well under what I was expecting, and it was a little over 40,000. And now I'm just waiting for them to contact DigSafe to do their legal obligation to check for utilities underground. And then once that happens, then they can put it in. After that is put some lines on there, but that wouldn't be until the spring. But we should have quite a bit of leftover money afterwards, where I think we can utilize it in terms of erosion control, buying certain materials to put in certain places, whether it's riprap for ditching or a clean loam for slopes, for in them sensitive areas that it took months to take care of the invasives, so we could reseed it with natural grasses and all that. And we're in that time of year where our focus is constant maintenance on the fleet vehicles, making sure they're up to par, snow removals, and what else did we touch base on?
Well, I just wanted to give a shout out to your crew and say thank you for interrupting your own holiday time to come out and help the town with our first sort of snow and ice event over the Thanksgiving period, and they did a great job.
3 to 6 coming Wednesday night.
Oh boy.
I have an observation. I happen to, obviously being up here in my office right on Route 2, I saw a Davenport crane go by. So I followed it up to the yard and saw the replacement bridge for the Dragon Brook on Bardwell's Ferry Road loaded on a trailer. I then was saying, ooh, I'll shoot up and watch them take it off at Dragon Brook, but it went to Greenfield. So I'm assuming maybe there's repairs or something.
I haven't talked to Clayton. I know their plan was to at least get it on the flatbed today. And then we did some tree trimming down there so they could get the crane in there to set it in place. And from what Steve said is they said that they plan on putting it in Thursday. So I think today and the next couple of days is prep work leading up to that setting of the bridge.
Fantastic.
Rick?
Yes, sir.
The only thing I would add is that we did begin a discussion about capital planning that sort of bleeds into the emission control item on the agenda in terms of trucks and vehicles that Jeff may want to put on the replacement schedule, in the upcoming budget cycle to update our capital plan and update the fleet. According to Jeff, we have one of the 3 year 2000 trucks is still in the fleet, and that one is the main one sort of slated for replacement.
Terrific. Any other reports from other groups that you attend, Andrew?
No, not at this time. I don't have another. There will be another meeting. I think I reported on Pratt at the last meeting. Did I not? Yeah. And they do have another meeting scheduled in December. Um, and we're sort of looking at their CPA request and other things like that. So yeah.
Super. The only thing new I have for a report is from the Franklin Regional Transit Authority that meets quarterly. We met on Thursday, the 21st of November. There were 14 towns represented. I think this was my second or third meeting with them. It was interesting to me. I didn't realize they have services in 43 towns, which was interesting, of varying levels, of course. And based on the varying levels, those towns pay into the Franklin Regional Transit Authority on a weighted vote for the budget. The town of Shelburne is the fourth highest weighted vote because we do have more services or full services between demand response, fixed routes, etc. And I'm also understanding that sometime before the end of the year, the senior center will be getting a new bus, replacing the old. You may recall last summer, I believe, I reported that the Transit Authority was not charging for fixed route fares because it was the accounting software and the accountant and the bookkeeping was more costly than the revenue gained. So they just said none. Interestingly, the governor awarded in October $200,000, and all 15 regional transit authorities in the state now have fixed rates at no charge for the remainder of the budget year. I think I had one other. They still have a driver shortage. And again, I'll just put it out since we're a public record and people who watch this later as well. Anyone who knows anyone who might be interested to become a driver should contact the Franklin Regional Transit Authority. And my last comment from that meeting is demand response service. The demand response service is good at no charge through June of 2025. And we do have that service as well. That's everything. So
Thank you.
We're a minute away from our next public hearing. We'll do that. Oop, it's 6 on the dot. So let's go ahead and open this public hearing with the Board of Assessors. This was on tax rate classification hearing. You, my fellow select board members, received the packet later today from the assessor's office. I've reviewed it. I hope you've had a chance to at least glance at it. And I see our assessors have joined us, so we can turn the floor to them. You are muted, perhaps? Let me check. Nope. Can't hear you. It doesn't say you're muted, but
you may just have to turn the volume up, Karen.
A little bit. We can barely hear you, but at least we hear you.
No.
Can you check the settings for your audio? Make sure that the mic is working.
I used that laptop today and it was working. They may have to call in.
While we wait for them, I'll just give a brief overview. Each year before the tax rate can be set, the select board holds or must hold a public hearing known as a classification hearing to consider the percentage of the tax levy, which is the amount the town raises through the property tax. That'll be paid by owners of all classes of property, residential, open space, commercial, industrial, and personal property. And that's what we're doing this evening. And I see their videos back on, but the microphone isn't.
A little. Say something again.
Testing, 1, 2, 3.
Yeah,
Ooh.
we got you.
All right, try to speak as loud as we can. Thank you, Rick.
Before you start, can you tell me who you all are, please?
Oh, sure. Hi, Trisha. I'm Karen Tonelli.
I remember Karen. Thank you.
Dowski.
Say it again louder. Sorry, both of you.
Jody Dowski.
Hi, Jody. Can't hear. Sorry.
This is Joel Dwight.
Hi, Joel. It's nice to meet you. Thank you for your service, all of you.
Yeah. This is an annual process, as Rick referred to in the summary. It's a necessary process that is required prior to getting the tax rate determined and sending the tax bills out. So there's going to be votes from you and a decision from the Board of Selectmen before we can go ahead with the process. And I just try to provide you with as much information as possible so that you can make an informed decision on this. Just by way of explanation, we'll talk about the total valuation as well as the total tax levy. And quite simply, it's a matter of just dividing one into the other to get our mill rate or our tax rate every year. The total valuation, as I indicated, it increased to $372,724,033. It's an increase of about 37 million from last year. A majority of that increase is a result of the utilities that are located in town. You'll recall that we had hired a specialized appraiser to determine those values for us. And of that 37 million, 20 million is a result of those few properties. The rest is an increase in the residences as a result of the market. So provided you with a breakdown so you can sort of see the makeup of Shelburne in terms of how assessors look at it. We classify every parcel, and that means we determine its main use. And so a single family home, a 2-family home, a condo, its main use is residential. And we have 811 of those parcels in Shelburne. Commercial properties are pretty much what you'd think they are. They're businesses. We have 220 of those. We have industrial. That would be more like the hydros. And then the remaining is considered personal property. Personal property is different from real estate in that we tax assets of certain entities. So those are items like machinery, telephone poles, substations, turbines, things of that nature. And you can see that in the column that I provided to you on the right-hand column, the overall percentages of those classes are important because you can see that Shelburne is mainly residential, 73, almost 74%, and the remaining is commercial, industrial, personal property. We lump all that together and call it CIP. And the reason we lump it together is that when a town decides whether or not to split the rate, they're really just taking differences between those classes. If a town decides to split the rate, they're taking the burden off of the residential taxpayers and they're putting it on to the commercial, industrial, and personal property. That's the known as the Classification Act in Massachusetts. So that's a bit of an overview for the valuation. We're seeing an increase. The next is the levy. And that's pretty much the total amount that the town needs to raise by property taxes. We get that number from Finance Committee and from you at town meeting. It's basically everything that was voted at town meeting, less any other amounts from revenue sources, room excise, motor vehicle excise, payments in lieu of investment income, and any money we get from the state. And so the net amount of that is called the levy. And for FY25, the levy that we need to raise is $4,785,776, slightly higher than what was needed last year by about $343,000. So what the assessors asked the selectmen to decide is, do you wish to split the rate or have a single rate? And that's the next section where we provide some information to you on what that decision would mean. You know, Shelburne historically has a single rate. If you take a look at that chart that I provided, it seems to have a lot of numbers on it, but it's rather simple. That first line has a residential factor of 1. That's not splitting the rate at all. And if you read it across, you'll see those share percentages of the valuation and what that would mean in terms of an estimated tax rate, ET. So just going forward, if you were to determine a single tax rate is what you would like to do, it's $12.84 across the board tax rate. And that's a reduction from last year. The tax rate last year was $13.26. So any questions so far? Is it pretty clear, or yes, Andrew?
Yeah, just an update from you about the hiring the person who did the assessment on the utilities. Are we in a kind of steady state with them? Are they appealing any assessments we're making of them? Is there any litigation involved or pending? I'm just curious where we stand with that, since, as you mentioned, they represent the bulk of our increased assessment.
Right. So it's premature to answer that question because they don't know yet. They'll find out in December. The tax will go out in December. They'll see their new valuation and they'll have until February 1st to appeal. At that point,
I understand that part. I'm just curious whether they're currently appealing the current valuation that we have put on them. Okay.
No.
Okay.
Yeah. So they'll see quite an increase. And so this tax would be the one where I would expect that they would either act on or perhaps not. So that's what this chart means. As you move down the chart, you'll see as the residential factor decreases, so does the residential tax rate. Because what you're doing, if you were to choose a residential factor of less than 1, you're shifting the valuations and the burden so that more of it would go on to the commercial, industrial, personal, and less on the residential. And my calculations show that for every dollar that the commercial, industrial, personal property rate would increase, it would decrease the residential rate by only 36 cents. And this is a result of the makeup of what you have. You know, the majority being residential. When you shift onto a lower percentage, it takes quite a bit to reduce the residential. So you're really, in my opinion, having to put quite a heavy burden onto the commercial, industrial, personal property, only to really gain a relatively small reduction. And that may be very well why the reason to have a single rate has been decided by your board and your predecessors in the past. So again, following all the way down, the Classification Act allows us only to shift so much. Yes, Trish?
Thanks, Karen. I just wanted to make sure that I'm looking at the right column. So what you're talking about in this column on page 2 is under the estimated tax rate, the RESET, right? That's the residential estimated rate would be $12.84. And then by shifting some of that, let's go to 1.25, for example, it would lower it by $1.20 or something. Am I looking at this correctly?
Correct. If you do a CIP shift of 1.25 and you read it across, the residential rate would drop from $12.84 to $11.69. However, the commercial rate would go up from $12.84 to $16.05 per thousand. So
you're, go ahead.
Yep. So basically you're shifting those percentages of that levy, that 4,785,000 that we talked about, who's paying the majority of it. And you shift it when you shift the rates.
I see. I just wanted to make sure I was looking at this, understanding exactly what you were talking about with that shifting. So even if it went all the way to 1.5, the residential savings, let's just call it, is about $2, but the burden on the commercial, industrial, and personal property is over $6.
Correct.
Yep.
Right. And so
okay.
You can only shift so much. You can't shift such that you'd be relieving the residential burden by more than 65%. So there's sort of guardrails in there that towns can't simply say, wow, we'll put the whole burden on the commercial. There's sort of parameters in there. And these are the parameters. We could only go from 1 to 1.5. So these are your choices. Of course, I certainly could, if it was something, that wanted to be looked at more specifically, I could be providing you with percentages less than 5%. So you could see sort of the in-between, numbers. It doesn't necessarily have to be in 5% increments. I just didn't want to give you a whole page of percentages. But if that
we can give a guess between, we could extrapolate here. I think that'll be okay.
Exactly.
Thank you.
So that's really your first, so I'll go on just some information as far as what's happening to the average tax bills. And when I say the average tax bills, I am only talking about the average single family residential. There's different components. We obviously have condos. We have 2 families. We have 3 families. We have some mobile homes. But the largest majority of residential is single family. And so using the 1284, assuming that you would perhaps consider a single rate as you had in the past, the average tax bill would be $4,515. And I base that on the average assessment, which has gone up. It's $351,627 for FY25. and multiplying it by the 1284. Last year, as a comparison, the average assessed value was 336, and then last year's rate of $13.26. So that gives you sort of what would happen to the averages of the average single family. The overlay balance, again, just informative. You don't have to make any decisions on that, but I just thought you should know we have $127,269.50 in that account. And these funds are for the assessor's use for granting abatements and exemptions throughout the year. And this year, we set aside about 75,000, which is much more than we normally do. But given the fact that those few accounts are going to see some hefty increases, I think it's prudent to make sure we have enough in overlay in the event, as Andrew was asking, in the event we do find that they contest their assessments. So that's the account that we would adjust if the board were to decide they were overvalued, or if we were to get a bad decision from an appellate tax board, that those funds would come out of the overlay account. And then finally, excess levy capacity. That is something that the assessors are required to report to you every year. And that looks like that's about $561,787 this year. So that's it. You do have to take some other votes after you decide whether you want to split the rate or not. And those are outlined in the 3 paragraphs, which we can talk about if you have any questions and want to move on.
Okay. I don't see any residents on our meeting to ask any questions for this public hearing. So I am comfortable moving forward to a motion and discussion on the single or split tax rate for the town of Shelburne for the next fiscal.
I'll move that we continue with our single tax rate.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded to continue for our next fiscal year levy of a single tax rate, $12.84. Any further discussion? I'll put the
No,
matter.
I think if we are successful with the new valuations that we've created, then we will certainly be getting fair value from our commercial industrial side.
Right. And just so that you know what that 20 million translates into about $260,000 in taxes. And I think when I computed that, I used last year's rate. So I think you know, when we first broached this with the finance committee, there was a lot of discussion back and forth as far as whether or not it made sense economically. But those are the figures in real time. And the appraiser, I believe, is costing us, don't hold me to it, about $25,000 for his services. For
Right.
everything.
Before I call the vote, I don't want to be assuming. Would it be fair to say that the Board of Assessors supports a single tax rate?
Yes.
Great. Then I will call the matter to a vote. Andrew?
Aye.
Tricia?
Aye.
And I am aye. The motion to have a single tax rate passes 3-0. Okay,
Thank
Karen,
you.
next item.
So the other votes that come before you are exemptions to the property tax to certain classes. The first one is an open space discount. We have no land in Shelburne that is designated open space for this purpose. I mean, we certainly have open space through the chapters and folks that enjoy a special assessment for those, but we don't have anything designated as open space. So it's almost a moot issue.
Karen, just a matter of clarification, do we have to make motions if we're not taking any action, or?
Yes, you do have
Okay,
to. You
I'll
do.
move that we take no action on this exemption.
Right. The residential exemption is one that is available as well.
Oh, let's finish that one. Do we have a second?
Yeah, I was just waiting to hear the rest of what Karen said, but I'll go ahead and second it
Okay.
about the open space.
Then I will call that to a vote. Andrew,
Aye.
Tricia,
Aye.
and I am aye. That motion passes 3-0. No action on open space discount since it is essentially moot. Karen, you're
And
up.
Karen, so you don't have to read from your own notes, if you're going to tell us things that are not already written down, I would just move these items as they go and then let you add information that's not already in writing. Does that make sense?
Good plan, certainly.
Great. So I will move that we pass over the residential exemption.
Okay, so I just got this, so I'm just reading it through right now. So if you give me a moment, please. Okay, sure. I'll second that.
Karen, do you have anything in addition?
No, I don't, other than, this residential exemption is normally used in communities that have a large amount of second home owners. And they put the burden more on the second homeowners and ease it on the folks but that really wouldn't, it wouldn't work so much for Shelburne just because our makeup of the valuation isn't significant enough to entertain this.
Any further discussion, Tricia or Andrew?
No.
Here none, we'll put the matter to a vote. Andrew,
Aye.
Tricia,
Aye.
and I am aye. The motion to pass over residential exemptions passes 3-0. Andrew,
What is the next one on our list here? I'm sorry, I gotta go back to oh, here it is.
small commercial.
Oh, yeah, I move we pass over this one as well.
I'll second that.
Been moved and seconded. Discussion. Karen, any additional information other than what you supplied us earlier?
No, just for Trisha's benefit, maybe this is the first time she's hearing me say this. I know Rick and Andrew have heard it. It seems like it's a good idea to help small commercial businesses, but it doesn't play out that way. Most small businesses that you might think right on Bridge Street or in the area, they're tenants. They don't own the buildings. And so this is a benefit that would simply go to the owners, and they don't necessarily have to pass it on to the tenants. And the building has to have a value of over $1 million, and they have to be on this workforce development list. So there's quite a few hoops you have to jump through to be eligible.
Thank you, Karen. Yeah.
I don't think it helps the truly small business owner like it appears to.
Any further discussion, Tricia?
No, thank you for that explanation. That's an interesting. I did read about how it does go just to the owner, not to the actual business owner who might be a tenant in the building, but that also the valuation having to be $1 million or more, in addition to what you had stated about the Department of Workforce Development eligibility is important to note. So thank you for adding that. And I'm good at this time. Thanks.
Matter's been moved and seconded. We'll put it to a vote. Andrew?
Aye.
And Tricia?
Aye.
And I am aye. Motion passes 3-0. I think that takes care of all the business the assessors needed us for tonight.
Yes, thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you all.
For the great job you do. We appreciate it so much.
Thanks, guys.
Perfectly presented too. Thank you for the background you supplied us.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Excellent work. Take care. Have a good night.
You too. Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Rick, I was just going to make a suggestion that we jump to new business just so that Jeff can get back to his family.
I'm happy to do that. You know it's here. Okay. New business. We kind of touched on this earlier. This is information about the Mass DEP amending the rules for low emissions on the vehicle program for large vehicles and highway. We all viewed an extensive report on it. I think the crux to the matter was touched on by Andrew earlier in that the highway department superintendent and the finance committee and the select board worked together to develop a 10-year capital plan, which we have in place. It lays out vehicles that and equipment that needs updating, and I think this is something that'll play out naturally. There's no encumbrance on the town. The penalties are all levied against the manufacturer or dealership. It's such a frowned upon or impractical regulation, as I understand it, for snow plows in the winter months in New England, that it almost is laughable to be considered without the infrastructure to even charge these vehicles. So I suspect there'll be significant changes down the road too, and I don't see any need to panic early. But Andrew, as liaison to the police or to the highway department, do you have any thoughts, or pass it to Jeff for any initial comments?
No, I'm in agreement with you, Rick, on this. I'm hoping that your sanguine assessment turns out to be correct, that wiser heads will prevail and amend this idea, because I think while it may have merit 5 years from now, I don't think the technology is there yet for large, heavy duty highway equipment. And so we're just not at that point, I don't think, in the evolution of electric vehicles to make this practical. And I think Trish's points were well said in the memo you wrote, and glad to see you're attending the hearing on December 9th. Jeff, do you have thoughts on this you want to share? That's about all I've got.
I didn't know if anyone was aware of it. I actually pulled that information off my phone, on a news feed, because I didn't get any formal emails or anything through the computer or whatnot. But I just wanted to make everyone aware, throw that out there that, we need to plan, we need to put the town in a position now, and let the bugs get worked out before, eventually we have to move to such a fleet, we'll say. I mean, I think it's going to take quite some time before the utility companies are even ready to handle such a thing, especially if it's a statewide or even a countrywide type thing. But I'd figure if, start it early, get ahead of the game, and put the town in a position where, will be better now than in a couple of years.
I really appreciated you sending that. It was very informative, and I'm glad you did that. Andrew?
Just one thought that I have, maybe Tricia, if you would put this among your notes for the public hearing. I don't know if there'll be any opportunity for you to ask questions, but one question that I have is whether or not these changing regulations that are trying to reduce the emissions from heavy equipment and larger vehicles, it could be, if they include the use of biodiesel fuel to achieve that purpose. Because my understanding from the literature I've read on biodiesel is that even a 20% blend can significantly reduce your emissions without really requiring any major changes or any changes to to the vehicle setup to accommodate that. Again, I don't know if biodiesel is commercially available and if it's cost effective, but if push came to shove and we had to demonstrate some emissions reductions, that would be a fairly low impact way to do that without having to swap out our diesel vehicles.
Okay, sure. I'm hoping they'll be allowed to ask questions, and I will definitely put that one forward. I had the other one about, it doesn't sound to me like this is not going to have any adverse impact on us, because if we're going to be forced into purchasing a certain type of vehicle that really doesn't work for our community, we can't charge it. We end up having to do something else. I just don't see how not being allowed to have an exemption for snowplow, say, in a town as hilly as ours, is actually going to be not have any fiscal impact. Do you agree? I don't know enough about it, but it just seems to me that if they're restricting the number of vehicles we can get, then the cost of those vehicles might be larger than would in normal market conditions. And then we've got having to purchase something that may not, they may not be able to be used all day out on the hills plowing snow.
Well, that's my basic question here is I don't think that there is a comparable truck that's within some kind of range of what you would pay for a diesel truck that can operate for an 8 or 10 hours at a time on an electric charge. And if you have a major snowstorm and you got people out working at night in hazardous conditions, you don't want them to have to go back and recharge their vehicle and take a lot of time to do that, if they're only able to operate it for, a few hours at a time. I don't really know, the specs here of what's actually commercially available at this time, but it's hard for me to believe that there is a comparable vehicle out there.
Jeff, just for my own knowledge, when I attend this meeting next week, what's a typical, what are you expecting to happen on Wednesday with 3 to 6 inches? How long are you guys going to be out? How much fuel are you going to use, and how many trucks? Just so I have an idea of what we're talking about.
Well, we're going to have at least 5 trucks or 4 trucks and a loader minimum. The 1 truck and the loader will be in the village, and 3 or 4 trucks will be in the hills. And you can go anywhere from, depending on snowfall. I mean, the heavier the snow, the more fuel you go through. But you can look at probably 200 gallons of fuel using. They're predicting 3 to 6 right now because it's going to be a light, fluffy snow. But you're looking at 4 hours just to scrape, and then you have to monitor in terms of treating the roads for melting and icing purposes after the fact. So, I mean, you're anywhere. This is probably a 4 to 8 hour storm for us until the sun shines and starts melting. But from what I've heard, there was a salesman that said that, one of these big trucks would get at a 70-degree temperature range on flat ground. You're looking at 250 miles of runtime on a full charge. Now, anything below 70 degrees and any inclines above, I think it was 7 degrees, you can reduce that in half. So you're looking at 125 miles on a full charge. But that doesn't include your dump truck being fully loaded with material, with your plow weights. So you could probably, you're not looking at much. And
It's smaller and smaller by the minute.
And to put limits of that charge, and you end up running out of charge and you're dying. Now you have a fully loaded truck creating a safety hazard because you're dead in the water in the middle of a road. with no lights,
Mm-hmm.
because there isn't anything to power them.
I think the best part of this is, Jeff, that you saw it, recognized it, brought it to our attention. That Tricia will dig some more information, and between Andrew and you and bringing it to the finance committee and the 10-year plan as a contingency to perhaps even up move up in the order of purchase vehicles that might fall into this window might be prudent, but that's all capital planning between you and the finance committee, and will come to the board as well. So good on you for bringing it to our attention for sure.
Yeah, I second that for sure, Jeff. Thank you very much. And so I guess, Rick, if I can just make sure that we're all on the same page with this, I'll attend the hearing. I'll ask Andrew's question, use some of the information Jeff just provided so I know what I'm talking about when I might ask other questions. And then I'm going to just write up a summary of what I learned and send it to Terry for distribution. Does that?
Yeah, that sounds great, Tricia. I think the primary question, the biodiesel is certainly one I'm interested in, but the primary question is really the one Jeff laid out: is there a vehicle that will do better than what he described, that will actually get the job done, in the hill towns? That's really what we're asking. And is it of comparable cost to what we would pay for a diesel truck of similar capabilities? I think if the answer is no on both counts, then they need a serious rethink on how they're going to roll this thing out, because I think more time is needed for that technology to improve.
Yep.
I think also, Tricia, the infrastructure definitely is not here, and that would, they're talking moving it to model year 2025, right?
Yeah.
Or to
They
2026.
want to move it ahead. Yeah, but that's still basically a year from now, right? Because 2025s are coming out now.
And there's no way. I mean, if we bought a 2026 model, it's going to sit there for how many years before the infrastructure is there to be able to put it on a charger, much less multiple versions of that. So I think I think we're on the right path to dig out more information and stay on top of the issue.
I actually have a quick question. Jeff, are your snow plows considered emergency vehicles?
That's actually a very good question. I actually had a gentleman today stop in, and we had this discussion. And generally, as a DPW worker or a highway worker, you're not really considered emergency. But I guess when 911 happened, I guess President Bush actually, declared that, highway departments, DPW people should be considered emergency or response personnel because of what they do. If you think about it, without us, the fire engines, the police departments, they can't make it to where they can in the winter without them roads being plowed. So that, when reading that language and what they had in that little memo there, is kind of gray, because if you're not considered it, they'll be like, no, you're not police or fire. I consider us part of it. Because without that, like I said, I mean, your engines and your ambulances and your police force are gonna struggle without them roads plowed. So
I think if you've ever sat behind a sander going up the mountain at 15 miles an hour, you definitely know that if that sander wasn't there, you'd have a serious emergency on your hands.
Yeah.
Here's why
No,
I think it's probably going to end up commercial vehicles mostly, but again, our eyes are opened and we'll stay on top of it.
I'll do what I can.
Go get them. Thank you. And thanks for hanging in there, Jeff. And thank you, Andrew, for having me jump ahead for that.
Thanks, Jeff. Enjoy your evening.
You guys as well.
Thank you.
Which just puts us back to old business. Complaints done. The first item is the ARPA funding requests. This is something that we touched on last week, but didn't want to take a vote, Tricia, in your absence. I personally would like to put this to bed, since we have to do this by the end of the month anyway, and as we do have 2 meetings left as an emergency zone there if it doesn't work out. But we currently have $40,315.62 available that we need to allocate prior to the end of the month. We have the Pocket Park work to complete that at 35,000, which would leave a balance of $5,315.62. And I think personally the right spot for that would be to continue the capital gym improvements that we began this year. Tricia, you were not on the board during last year's budgeting process and meetings with the finance committee, but a list was brought forward of the neglectful absence of care for the Cowell building, of projects that just needed to be addressed, period. They weren't like, yeah, maybe someday it was time to deal with them. And it was broken out into 2 parts. We funded half of it, and between the finance committee and the select board, we picked those most urgent items to happen this year. There's more to be done and coming up, and I think the opportunity to complete at least one more item on the list would make sense for use of that $5,315, because it's it's our only official voting place. We need to keep it, and there is foundation and door issues under the tap room, which is the section, the big doors behind the back of the gym, that we have not funded yet. I've heard they've even had to stop putting the basketballs in there because it's so cold that they deflate. So in that room, Tricia, also there is basically a very poor closure to what used to be a doorway to a stairwell down to the ground. And that's something that was identified that also needs to get done. So the foundation directly under that door is also has a sill deterioration. Since that structure is integral and built into the side of that, the rear end of the Cowell gym, I think that's something that definitely should get addressed, and the $5,315.62 balance would make a lot of sense for that as well. But let's kick it around. Any thoughts from either of you? Andrew.
Rick, I was just, this is sort of a question for Terry in the process of just thinking about the language of these motions, but my question is really about encumbering these funds before the end of the year, given that we don't, we haven't gone out to bid for them. And so my recommendation, if this is possible, is to say, let's move that we would allocate up to 35,000 for the Pocket Park improvements, and any unspent funds would then be allocated to the Cowell Gym project. Can we do that, Terry, in the language of encumbrance here?
Between now and December 31st, I have to show the funding agency how the money has been earmarked. We have a year to spend it. So as long as the projects have been identified, I see no reason why when it comes to the final report a year from now, if we need to shift unspent funds to another project, as long as it's an approved project by December 31st of this year, it doesn't have to be an exact science.
Okay. I just didn't know how much flexibility you had with the encumbering here, but it sounds like you have some pretty good flexibility. So, yeah. I think these are all three are fine projects, and we can uh, I don't know. Is your sense, Terry, that if the bids came in lower than 35 and we had some extra funds to move toward Cowell, that there would be more than $5,300 worth of work there?
Yeah,
We're
definitely.
town appropriated, I believe, 55,000. And I think
Okay.
John said he spent 17,000 of it to date, maybe 14, but he's looking at over 20 windows to address in that building, whether it be full replacement or storm windows. So yes, easily,
Okay. So I've
Powell's
been,
looking at,
A lot.
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And there was also that storage room that's back there where that I think it's that same kind of room that you were talking about, Rick. I mean, I've seen it from the outside where that doorway is blocked off, and Tom wanted to use some of that space for storage of emergency equipment, emergency management equipment back there. And so that would be part of that project too, but he didn't think that was going to, and neither did John Walsh, think it was going to be that expensive to include that. But I'm just looking at it thinking, I don't think, I mean, they'll blow through that $5,000 very easily because there's plenty of work to be done at Cowell. I mean, there could be painting done, there could be, the lighting, the windows is an obviously huge expense. So I would agree with that.
That's great.
gonna-
That's all I was looking for. I think it sounds like
Yeah.
we have plenty of things to spend the money on.
Mhm. I don't think we're in a position to talk about assigning use of that space. However, there's a lot of other things to consider. One, I think, will come up under item C, old business, where there may be other options, and whether it's prudent to have storage there at all. I think that's a discussion for another time, but putting it into a sound condition, I think, is the job at hand. So,
Right.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
My suggestion would be to have the board vote to earmark 35,000 for the pocket park and then any unspent balance towards Cowell Gym capital improvements.
I agree. I'm so moved.
Well, hang on, don't we have to also account for that 5,315
separately,
right now? Also, or we just do, because we have 40,000 left, right?
if you
All
want to
right.
put,
Well, I'll move that we allocate up to 35,000 for the pocket park and 5315.62 for Cowell Gym improvements, and any unspent balance in the pocket park can go to the Cowell Gym improvements.
So we're not going to consider the AED unit at all.
The only reason I'm not putting it on the list, Tricia, is that I think there are other grants that can get us an AED unit, aren't there?
There might be. Yeah, I just can't look at everything all the time.
No,
I'm
I think
looking at floods right
in,
now.
I see that in Tom's bailiwick, that he can bring forward a grant application to get us an AED unit.
Yeah,
Well,
he can.
And before that's considered for the town hall, it will need a dedicated telephone line. So to run a telephone line in the foyer of town hall to operate.
it needs a dedicated line without having to dial 9 to get to an outside line. So there's other things to consider for it. But we do have a motion on the floor.
Okay, well, I'll second the motion.
The
I
motion
think
is
that's a good motion.
motion moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll put the matter to a vote. Andrew
Aye.
and Tricia.
Aye.
And I am aye. The motion passes 3-0.
Whew, we got that off the agenda. We should congratulate ourselves.
Staring at that list for a year and a half.
I've only
we
seen
get-
it for a few months and I'm ready. I'm like, okay, we're done. Get this done.
Well, we got a lot of good stuff done with that funding. I think
No question.
yeah,
Fantastic.
it was a very helpful chunk.
And most of it before my time as well, too. So congrats to you who
Yeah.
were here for all of it, Andrew.
And Terry.
Especially Terry, sorry. Such a bad man. Um, Old business, solar array installation pole barn. It is complete. Any other further updates since our last meeting?
No, just waiting for it to be energized.
Community Action Pioneer Valley regarding future funding. We've discussed this at our last meeting because the particular grant that we have done for years, we don't have a project to apply for this year. We can't apply for it only for the community action money that we were using, splitting off for the grant previously. The Community Action of Pioneer Valley contacted us with concerns that they may have to close the Cowell Gym location. And the discussion came up, well, maybe there's other ways to look at funding it with the two towns participating. I believe that was your idea, Andrew. And we have found more information on that no grant appropriation or use of public money or property or loan of credit shall be made or authorized by the Commonwealth or any political subdivision thereof for the purpose of funding, maintaining, or aiding an infirmary, hospital, institution, etc. It's not publicly owned and under the exclusive control, order, or supervision of public officials or public agents. So it was a good idea, but it doesn't look like that's an option.
What was that idea again? I totally missed that. That's a block grant concept?
No,
No, one of the ideas that was tossed about was possibly Buckland and Shelburne subsidizing the food pantry through an appropriation at town meeting.
that
We're
was
not allowed,
cannot
we're
be
not allowed to
done.
do that. Yeah,
That's correct.
right.
so that option is off the table. Is all I'm saying is that idea
Okay,
that idea was broached at our last meeting.
I see. Okay.
That idea is off the table.
Oh,
So
I'm sorry. I just got mixed up about what you were reading from, but you're just reading excerpts from the anti-aid thing.
right.
Yeah, okay.
So I don't know that there's anything else that we can do on this at this point.
No, I think it would be in the bailiwick of the food pantry if they wanted to um, do some kind of fundraising effort or seek other grants or do a GoFundMe campaign or whatever. But
So
it
there,
sounds like our ability to direct any sort of town funding is zero, and I don't know that we have a line on any other grants that we could support them with. Do you know of anything, Terry, that
I
fits?
don't. I did reach out to Natalie Blay just to explain the situation and see if she had any ideas, but I have not heard back.
so I agree. It's in the ballpark. It's in the court of Community Action Pioneer Valley. If they have funds to divert to keep that open for a year, perhaps. They're funded through June of 2025, all set there. So it would be the next fiscal year that the town of Shelburne wouldn't be able to push any money their way to support the program at the Cowell. But who knows? We may be looking at a project for a grant the following fiscal year. So it's possible that they can get through a year on their own before considering next year, or they just have to close it up. I think those chips will fall where they may, but it's, as you said, Andrew, I think it's up to them to pursue options to keep it open, and there's nothing we can do that we can see at this point.
Rick?
Yes.
I was just going to go off the last thing you said about we may apply next year. Terry, do you know if we have had any conversation with Linda of does she think there are eligible projects for future block grants that we should be considering or thinking about, teeing up a year from now? And B, is she still in the mix as our grant writer or not?
No, Linda gave her notice a year ago.
Okay.
She's retired. She's closing out the current grant, or she's going to stay until the Highland Village kitchen renovation project is done, which I believe will be June of this year, and do the closeout paperwork, but then she's done.
So we would need to find a new grant writer.
Yes.
Okay. Are there any hiding in the bushes here that we should know about, or
You dream
Not that I'm aware of. I think the regional housing group may be versed in community development block grants, but whether or not they're taking on, we'd have to have a project, I guess, before we started really pursuing.
and it might be helpful to have just sort of a closeout meeting with Linda to pick her brain a little bit about saying, what do you think about the future for the next grant writer to come along? Are we tapped out, or are there some things to look at in our little, CDBG map area that are still doable and competitive?
Have you even considered, asking UMass in the public policy department there if they had students that could help with grant writing as
I
part
would
of their?
strongly not recommend that, Tricia. I've been a CDBG grant writer in past careers, and it's a very detailed and laborious process to put together a competitive application. It's not something that would fit a student project timeline.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Let's move on then. Any other business? Our next regularly scheduled
Well-
meeting is December
Well, Rick, I just
16th.
wanted to follow up there. On my question, is it possible to connect with Linda for a sort of closeout meeting?
Are you asking the board if we want you to do that?
If we want to invite her to a select board meeting and have that, I mean, typically, if she was continuing in the role, we would do that in the course of having a public hearing for the next round of block grants. But if she's not continuing in that role, then that sort of window of opportunity is just going to come and go because nobody is triggering that process.
Typically,
And
though, before that public hearing happens, Linda would reach out to myself, water, sewer, highway, and say, what have you got for me?
right.
And then she would come up with a handful of projects to present at a public hearing.
Right. So that's what I was kind of suggesting, that we might get some tips from Linda on her way out the door to say, where are we leaving this process? And is there anything in the hopper that you know of, or do we just have to start from scratch with a new grant writer and see where we get?
I
But
could
she's been doing this for us for what, 25 years or more, and it seems like it would be helpful to get a little bit of handoff of the baton here.
I could see if there's a willingness to have that discussion with the board and scheduler.
Okay. I think it would be helpful, but I don't know what you all feel about that.
Yeah, well, she resigned over a year ago, so obviously her decision is firm, but maybe she's willing to spend some time kicking it around. Doesn't hurt to ask.
Well, I'm not asking her to come back out of
No,
retirement.
I
I'm
understand.
saying before she wraps up the
I-
Highland Village project, which is 6 months from now, we might have a conversation with her.
Let's see if she's open to it.
Yeah.
I just had one other question about this before we move on. Should we be sending a letter back to Community Action Pioneer Valley since they sent us a letter? And
Yes,
just let
I
them
will
know?
I will draft something.
Thank you, Terry. I just
You're
wanted to
welcome.
make sure I knew what was happening next. All right, very
Good
good.
thought,
Thank you.
Tricia. Good thought, Tricia. Thank you.
Mhm.
Now, any other business?
Question.
Andrew?
We had some emails on this topic, and I defer to you, Rick, as the chair, as how you want to proceed. But my only recommendation is that if we have a complaint against a member of the board, that we should talk about it. I don't know what the complaint is or who it's against.
And I would not argue that, except that given the sensitivity of the nature of it, we wouldn't do it publicly with an employee, and we wouldn't do it, therefore, in my opinion, amongst ourselves in an open meeting, that we would want to look at an executive session with town council. So if you want to pursue that, that's where that would have to go.
I have no idea what the complaint is, so can't say whether it rises to that level or not.
I'm hoping messages observed, and we need to bring it up again. But if we do, we'll
Well,
figure
the
it out.
message that you provided from MGL or whatever about select boards is about taking action outside of a meeting. And without knowing the nature of the complaint, I can't say for myself if the complaint is directed at me, whether I was perceived to be taking action or not. So again, your directive sounds good, but I have no idea whether it applies either to me or to the complaint.
Let me muse that, and we'll figure that out perhaps somewhere between now and our next meeting.
All righty.
Another matter that I think, Andrew, you wanted to bring up under any other business was the communication, and so we'll call it correspondence as opposed to any other business. We did receive correspondence from a resident on Water Street regarding a tree that was supposed to be scheduled for removal, and resident felt unresponsive feedback from our tree warden, and asked us to see what we could do about it. My thought process on that communication is that he is an elected official, that as a board, rather than any of us reaching out to him individually, I think we should ask Terry to contact him, perhaps even send on some of the detail and find out what is the status of the removal of that tree at our request. Would that be reasonable to do, Terry?
I didn't receive, this is the first I'm hearing of it.
Oh, I
wasn't aware.
I forwarded to you when we received it. As soon as I saw it, I let the resident know that I copied you on it. So
Huh. How long ago?
hang on one
Over the
second.
week-
I'm gonna
over the
tell you.
I also forwarded it to you, Terry, in my reply, which was shortly before the meeting.
I
Okay.
sent it yesterday, Sunday, December 1st at 6:01 p.m.
All right, I'll look for it. Huh.
So, yeah, so I think probably, if I may, I think if Terry, we haven't heard from you about what you know about it, or whether there is a work order in the works. So we need that sort of to close the circle on this before doing anything else. So once you read that, if you I guess so, since this involves an elected official in town, what is our role specifically, or how can we help, just, since now that we're aware of it?
Well, I think we should ask Terry to contact him as an elected official with the question, where is this at? Because there's been communication that it was going to happen weeks ago and it didn't. And the vendor was contacted, and it was felt they didn't know they had a work order from the town of Shelburne. So there's a lot of details that aren't adding up.
Right.
And I think it's within our purview to ask the town administrator to ask the elected official for an accurate update of what's going on with this tree and the status to date. Is that reasonable, Terry?
Absolutely.
Andrew, did you have a further thought?
Only to say that this is not the first time this kind of situation has arisen, and I would, if the board is favorable to it, and Terry wants any assistance, I'm happy to back her up on this. Having been able to communicate with Jim in the past on various projects, if she needs any help, I'm happy to follow up.
Offer made. Let's go ahead and review the email that we received, Terry, and reach out to the tree warden and bring us back a report either by email ahead of the next meeting or by the next meeting.
Okay.
Great.
Thank
you.
you.
Was there any other correspondence, Terry?
No.
Any public comment? We have no public. So I guess we have the ability to have a motion to adjourn.
I will move that.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to adjourn this meeting of the Select Board. Thank you very much for it. I'll call it to a vote. Tricia?
Aye.
Andrew? And I am I, and thank you guys for a great meeting tonight. Appreciate everything.
Good night.
Thank
Good
you,
night,
everyone.
everybody.
Bye-bye.